The wind bit sharp through the streets of Maple Hollow, Illinois, a small town where winter dragged its heels and sunlight quit early. Tanisha, just 18, tightened her thrift store jacket and leaned over her rusted bicycle, her only inheritance from the mother she buried last spring. Delivery shifts kept her afloat. Barely. Groceries, takeout, pharmacy runs, whatever folks paid her to bring. Tonight's last job would cover just enough to keep her from sleeping under the overpass again. But as she turned onto the cracked sidewalk near Riverbend in Pine, she spotted something odd. An elderly woman stood alone at a half-forgotten bus stop, clutching a worn purse and murmuring to herself. Her silver hair curled beneath a faded knit cap. Each passing car made her flinch with hope and wilt in confusion. Tanisha glanced at her watch. 7:48 p.m. 10 minutes to make the drop. But her eyes lingered. The woman's lips trembled. Her voice caught in the wind. Bus 12. Oak Terrace. Is this the right stop? The delivery could wait. Kindness couldn't. Tanisha wheeled closer. Her voice soft. Ma'am. Do you need help getting home? What she didn't know, what no one could, was how deeply that question would change both their lives. Part 1. The Choice. Tanisha steadied her old bicycle with one hand and reached into her jacket pocket for her phone. The screen flickered dimly. 7:48 p.m. The app showed one final delivery. A hot meal for a regular customer near Crescent Hill. She had 12 minutes to make it. Just enough time, if she took the shortcut through Parkview Avenue and didn't stop. But something about the old woman at the bus stop held her in place. Tanisha glanced again at the figure standing near the rusted bench. The woman hadn't moved. Her wool coat hung loose on her frame, and her small leather purse dangled uselessly from one shoulder. Every few seconds, she looked down the road with a hesitant hope in her eyes, only for her face to fall again in quiet confusion. People passed by, bundled up, rushing home, but no one stopped. No one even looked. Tanisha's breath came out in clouds. Her fingers, already stiff from the wind, gripped the handlebars tighter. This was not her problem. She didn't have time. One late delivery and she wouldn't make rent. Mr. Coulter, her landlord, had already warned her. One more missed payment and the lock would change. But then the woman spoke again, barely above a whisper. Bus 12, Oak Terrace, is this the right stop? Her voice cracked with uncertainty, trembling in a way that didn't match the bitter wind. Tanisha's chest tightened. Oak Terrace. That was clear across town. No bus 12 came through Maple Hollow after 7:30 p.m. Everyone knew that. She looked down at her bike. The chain squeaked from the cold, and the rear rack was barely held together by an old bungee cord. It wasn't built for passengers, definitely not uphill. Her legs ached just thinking about it. But her mama had taught her something before cancer took her away. If you have the strength to stand, you have the strength to help, even if no one's watching. Tanisha exhaled and rolled her bike forward. Ma'am, she said gently, you okay out here? The woman blinked at her, dazed. I was waiting for the 12. But I think it missed me. Tanisha forced a small smile. I don't think that bus runs anymore. Do you know where you live? The woman hesitated, then pulled at the chain around her neck. A silver pendant dangled from it, catching the dim streetlight. On the back, barely visible. Evelyn Grant, 214 Oak Terrace Drive. Tanisha's heart sank. That was nearly 6 miles away. Uphill, in the cold, and it would mean missing her last delivery. She looked into Evelyn's eyes, wide, scared, and strangely trusting. That was all it took. Tanisha nodded slowly, her voice quiet. All right then, let's get you home. She wrapped her spare scarf around the bike seat, gently helped Evelyn onto the back rack, and slipped off her own jacket to put over her shoulders. As the town lights faded behind them, the cold deepened, but so did something else, something warmer than fear. Compassion. Part 2. Uphill roads. The first few blocks weren't so bad. Tanisha pedaled carefully, weaving through narrow streets lit by flickering streetlights. Evelyn sat behind her, wrapped in Tanisha's jacket and scarf, hands tucked neatly in her lap, humming something faint and old. At times, the tune would falter, and she'd ask the same question, are we almost there? Her voice caught somewhere between memory and fog. And every time, Tanisha answered the same way. We're getting closer. Ma'am, Just hold on. But as the pavement gave way to the cracked incline of Hollow Ridge Hill, the real journey began. Her legs, already worn from a full day of deliveries, started to burn. The back tire slipped once on loose gravel, and she nearly lost balance. Her fingers, red and stiff, clutched the handlebars tighter as the cold bit deeper. The wind had picked up now, the kind that made your eyes water and stole your breath the moment you opened your mouth. And still, she kept pedaling. Each block stretched longer than the last. The hill never seemed to end. Her knees ached, her back screamed, but Tanisha refused to stop. Not with Evelyn shivering behind her. Not when this woman had no one else. She thought of the delivery she was supposed to make. Thought of the room she'd likely lose tonight. Thought of her duffel bag, half packed and ready for the street. And then she thought of her mother. Of the nights she'd come home late from the diner. Her hands cracked from dishwater and her feet blistered from 10-hour shifts. Of the way she always smiled anyway. Always found time to braid Tanisha's hair. Or sing a little hymn while folding laundry. You don't need a lot to be kind, her mama used to say. Just the will to do it when it's hard. Tanisha pressed harder on the pedals. At a gas station halfway up the hill, she stopped for just a moment, her breath coming in short bursts. Inside, she bought a small cup of tea with the last crumpled dollar in her pocket. She handed it to Evelyn, but the older woman shook her head gently and pushed it back. No, you need it more, she said, her voice firm, almost grandmotherly. Tanisha took a sip, warmth sliding down her throat like hope, and held the cup steady while Evelyn drank the rest. Then they were off again. Into the dark, past sleeping fields dusted with frost, across a narrow bridge humming with wind, through bends in the road where the moon cast shadows longer than trees. Evelyn spoke less now, only a soft, rhythmic humming came from behind her, like a lullaby without words. Tanisha didn't mind. The silence helped her focus, on the road, on the pain, on the simple goal of getting this woman home. By the time they reached the iron gate of 214 Oak Terrace Drive, it was nearly 9:30 p.m. Tanisha's legs felt like stone. Her hands had gone numb. But she didn't stop until she rolled to a gentle halt in front of the gate. An older man in a housecoat opened the door. His face shifted from panic to stunned relief as he saw Evelyn. Miss Evelyn, we've been looking everywhere. Tanisha watched as Evelyn blinked, smiled softly, and said, I went for a little ride. The man rushed forward, helping her inside. Then he turned back to Tanisha. God bless you. Please, come in, warm up. Get something to eat. Tanisha shook her head, forcing a tired smile. I gotta go. He tried again. At least let us drive you home. She hesitated, then quietly replied, There's no home to go back to. With that, she scribbled her number on the back of a gas station receipt and handed it to him. In case she needs anything. Then she turned, mounted her bike, and pedaled back into the cold. Her future uncertain, her body exhausted, but her heart steady. If you're still listening to Tanisha's journey with me, comment the number 1 below to let me know you're here. This story is only just beginning. Part 3, Nowhere to Go. By the time Tanisha reached the edge of Maple Hollow again, the world had quieted into that peculiar stillness that only winter knows. The kind where everything seems to hold its breath, no traffic. No voices, not even the usual hum of far-off televisions leaking through apartment walls. Just the wind and the wheels of her bike, squeaking with every turn. Her legs trembled from the long ride. Every bump in the road sent a dull ache up her spine. But she kept moving. She had to. The old boarding house on Elm Street stood like a forgotten relic in the dark, paint peeling. Porch light dead, windows fogged from inside warmth she was no longer welcome to. She parked her bike beside the steps and reached into her jacket for the key. Gone. She checked again. Every pocket, every seam. Her hands shook harder. Not from the cold this time, but from realization. She knocked softly, then louder. No answer. When she tried the knob, it didn't budge. And then she saw it. A crumpled plastic grocery bag resting by the door. Inside, her few belongings. A towel, a spare shirt, a broken phone charger. Taped to the door above it in thick black marker were 3 words. Past due. Locks change. She stood there for a long minute, staring at the sign, her breath catching in her throat. The ache in her legs didn't matter now. Neither did the chill in her bones. What did you expect? She thought bitterly. A parade? Still, no tears came. Just a hollow ache, deeper than physical pain, the kind that whispered, "You don't belong anywhere," with nowhere else to go. She turned back toward town. It was close to midnight when she passed the alley behind Lawson's Market, the same corner store where she sometimes helped stack boxes in exchange for leftover sandwiches and day-old bread. She hesitated. The back door was unmarked, but she knew it well. She tapped twice, then waited. After a long pause, the hallway light flicked on, spilling warmth across the cold pavement. A second later, the door creaked open. There stood Mr. Lawson, robe wrapped tight around his broad frame, a steaming mug in hand. He squinted at her through the cold and grunted softly. "Didn't make rent, huh?" Tanisha just shook her head. He looked up at the sky, then stepped aside without another word. "Cots still in the storage room. Don't touch the wine crates. And don't freeze to death. I hate paperwork." She managed a soft, grateful, "Thank you," and stepped inside. The storeroom smelled of citrus and cardboard, and the old radiator in the corner groaned as if annoyed at being disturbed. Tanisha pulled the thin blanket from the cot and wrapped it tight around herself. She didn't even bother removing her shoes. Just collapsed, bones heavy, heart heavier. She lay awake in the dark, Evelyn's voice replaying in her mind, the soft hum behind her on the bike. The way she smiled and said, "You remind me of someone I love." That memory clung to her like a fragile thread. She didn't know what it meant, or if she'd ever see the woman again. But it had felt real. And that mattered. The radiator clanked once more. Tanisha closed her eyes. She woke to a pale gray morning. The kind where sunlight seems unsure whether it should rise. The storeroom was still, except for the soft creak of the building settling into its bones. She folded the blanket neatly and stepped toward the front of the store. Her boots made soft sounds against the linoleum. Mr. Lawson was already behind the counter, opening the register with the ease of muscle memory. He didn't say anything, just handed her a banana and half-warmed cup of coffee. She took them with a quiet, "Thanks," and stood near the window, watching Maple Hollow stir awake. Cars coughed to life in driveways. Children shuffled to the bus stop. Steam lifted from the bakery across the street. It felt like any other morning, until the black car pulled up to the curb. Sleek, silent, out of place. A man in a dark wool coat stepped out, holding a slip of paper. His eyes scanned the store, locked on Tanisha. The bell over the door chimed. "Excuse me," he said gently. "I'm looking for someone named Tanisha." She turned slowly. "That's me." He smiled with visible relief. "Miss Evelyn Grant asked me to find you. She remembers everything. She wants to thank you." She insisted. Tanisha's breath caught. Mr. Lawson sipped his coffee, watching but saying nothing. And for the first time since last night, something flickered inside her. Hope. Fragile, uncertain, but alive. Part 5. The Light We Carry. The room Evelyn offered Tanisha overlooked the garden, an old space filled with ivy-covered trellises, winding stone paths, and early buds daring to bloom despite the cold. The morning light touched everything inside that room with gentle insistence. Like it, too, was rooting for her to start over. For the first few nights, Tanisha barely touched anything. She folded her clothes into neat stacks at the edge of the dresser, kept her duffel bag zipped in the closet, and made the bed so tightly it looked untouched. She didn't feel like she belonged. Not yet. But every morning, Evelyn would knock, never demanding, always soft, and ask, "Tea in the sunroom?" And Tanisha, though shy at first, always said yes. There was something about the rhythm of those mornings that began to warm the frost around her spirit. They would sit by the windows sipping citrus tea, watching birds peck at the feeders. Evelyn would tell stories of her younger days, of her late husband, of a time when the house was full of voices and movement. "Grief is like silence," Evelyn once said, her voice distant. "It fills the rooms when no one else does." Tanisha didn't answer that day, but she understood. She had been carrying her own kind of silence for years. By the end of the month, something shifted. Evelyn handed Tanisha a brochure. "It's the local community college. I circled a few programs, just in case." Tanisha hesitated. School had always felt like a door that had slammed shut behind her when her mother got sick. But now, maybe it wasn't too late. She chose a social work track, not because she knew what to do with it yet, but because it felt like a path that gave back, something she deeply understood. Evelyn smiled the first morning she left for class. You remind me of the girl I used to be. Brave, even when it doesn't feel like it. Tanisha smiled back, tighter but genuine. I'm just trying. That's more than enough. The house became more than a shelter. It became a partnership. Together, they spent evenings in Evelyn's old study, sketching out ideas on yellow notepads, typing up proposals, and making phone calls. Evelyn had the wealth, Tanisha had the heart, and between them, something new began to bloom. The Willow Light Fund, named after the quiet street where they first met. The fund's mission was clear: support young people like Tanisha, resilient, overlooked, and provide resources to the elderly like Evelyn, who had slipped through the cracks of a busy world. They started small: scholarships, counseling sessions, a community garden where teens and seniors worked side by side. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't perfect, but it mattered. One evening, Tanisha rode her old bike back into town, not out of necessity, but memory. She passed Lawson's Market and waved at Mr. Lawson, who nodded and held up a bag of fresh oranges. She rode past the old boarding house, still shut tight, and then she slowed as she neared the faded bench at the bus stop where it all began. It was empty, of course, but in her mind, she could still see Evelyn standing there, lost, small, nearly invisible to the world. Tanisha parked her bike and sat on the bench for a moment, letting the cool metal press through her coat. She looked up at the street lamp, at the cracks in the sidewalk, at the place where her life had forked quietly and completely. She took a breath, not one filled with panic or cold, but purpose. When she returned to the estate, Evelyn was waiting with warm tea and an envelope. Inside was a hand-drawn map of the town, scribbled with circles and notes. What's this? Tanisha asked. Our next project, Evelyn said. I found an old rec center on the east side. Needs repair, lots of space. I thought it might make a good hub for the fund. Tanisha laughed, surprised by how natural it sounded. You never slow down, do you? Only to catch my breath. Evelyn smiled. They sat in the quiet for a while, teacups in hand, windows open to the night. And as the wind stirred through the garden beyond, Tanisha realized she was no longer surviving. She was building, becoming. And somewhere deep inside, the girl who once rode through the cold with nothing but a rusted bike and borrowed faith had become something else. A light, just like the one she had followed that night, just like the one she now carried forward. This isn't the end, just the beginning of something beautiful. If you're still here, still walking with Tanisha, comment the number 3 below to let me know you're listening. Because sometimes, the greatest stories don't begin with power. They begin with a choice to care. Sometimes, a rusted bike is enough. In a world that often moves too fast to notice, Tanisha stopped. She had every reason not to: cold, hunger, exhaustion, the looming threat of homelessness. But when she saw Evelyn, confused and forgotten at that bus stop, she chose kindness over convenience. And that single choice changed not only her life, but the life of someone else who had long believed her story was over. This story reminds us that the most powerful moments often begin with the simplest actions. A soft question, a warm scarf, a shared cup of tea. It's easy to believe you need money, status, or a perfect life to make a difference. But what Tanisha shows us is that what truly matters, compassion, courage, and quiet integrity, can bloom even in the hardest conditions. We live in a time where it's tempting to look away from hardship, to mind our own business, to scroll past someone else's pain. But what if, instead, we paused? What if we looked up and reached out? Because maybe what someone needs isn't a grand solution. Maybe it's just you, showing up, listening, being kind. And maybe, like Evelyn, you'll discover that helping someone else find their way home helps you find yours too. If this story touched something in your heart, please like, subscribe, and comment below. Let's keep telling stories that matter. Let's build a community that sees each other. Because sometimes, the light we're looking for is the one we carry.